VÄRITÄ, aka Kelsey Byrne, is an independent artist from New York who broke out onto the music scene in 2014 with her debut EP Echo, shortly following that up with two other EPs, Sentiment and Living, before dropping her dark and moody first album, Somewhere in Between. To me, Somewhere in Between was a hit. A lot of the songs felt very reminiscent of the likes of Banks and Lunar Shadows. I must admit, as my music taste grew, I'd find myself going back to different tracks on the album each time. Sometimes I'd be very in the mood for the likes of About You and Need Nothing, whereas more recently, over the past year or so, I've been going back to the likes of Phase Me Out and Floor. That's not a criticism on the album by any means. I think, in fact, it's a positive thing being able to go back to different tracks at different stages in your life. And that was something I found coming into New Skin. So VÄRITÄ welcomed us into this new era with the bombastic lead single Gone. This was a song I was quite taken aback with at first. I wasn't too sure how I felt, but I must admit at this point now it's top 5 VÄRITÄ. Like I said, Somewhere in Between was a very sort of dark, moody album, so when I was going into New Skin I wasn't quite sure what to expect, and I was very pleasantly surprised. I was surprised to not be greeted with these moody, dark instrumentals, and I did actually find a lot of enjoyment in the vibrancy of this track list. So finally, getting into the album, we open this with quite possibly my favourite VÄRITÄ song, period. New Skin is such a gorgeous track. It has this haunting instrumental which is led by a piano. VÄRITÄ's vocals are so warm and welcoming with this weird sinister tinge to them as she repeatedly chants the same two verses. While we're talking about openers really sort of setting the tone for the album, I want to go right to the closer, Amnesia, which is another really high point for me on this record. The production on this one weirdly reminds me a lot of the 1975. I'm not sure if they were a source of inspiration for VÄRITÄ, but it is a similarity I found myself making. The album isn't all ballads, however. There's a lot of really good pop songs here, and a lot of songs you can just bop to and have a good time with. However, New Skin, Gone and Amnesia are three of the absolute highlights on this record. Ocean, however, is a quintessential VÄRITÄ track. If somebody were to ask me who's VÄRITÄ, I'd probably show them this one. The way the production really develops and builds up through this one, especially in a track about getting lost in somebody, I think is genius. Whether that was intentional on behalf of the production or whether it came from VÄRITÄ herself, I really like that, and I think it really works with what the track is trying to be. And VÄRITÄ's vocals really do keep up with the production. This album shows more than anything that she can keep up, she can shine over these instrumentals, which I think is something we maybe lacked a bit in Somewhere in Between. While we're on the topic of vocals, I want to point out Body in My Bed, which I found to be another highlight on this record. Her vocals really soar in the latter half of this, and it's a really gorgeous track. This is one song on the album where I was like, yeah, this is classic VÄRITÄ. This is very reminiscent of Somewhere in Between. This is Somewhere in Between, but more grown and more sure of itself. That's one thing I found about this album. This is not only an extension of her discography, but she radiates confidence on this, and she is more comfortable in who she is as an artist. If this album is showing us the future of VÄRITÄ, then it looks to be a very exciting future of incredible music. Another standout song on this album has to be Faded. This one seems to be a fan favourite, and rightfully so. It should be. It's a really good pop song about a dying love. I mean, what do you expect from VÄRITÄ at this point? Songs with good beats to cry to, like, that is very her. While we're on the topic of bops, I want to talk about Think of Me, because this song is an anthem. This is one of VÄRITÄ's absolute best. I mean, with her lyric, I hope you fuck her with your eyes closed and think of me, how could it not be? I do really wish this track had been a second promotional single maybe instead of Youth, and perhaps given a music video, because I think this track really had the ability to be a massive hit. Right, so I'm going to get the one negative out of the way before we conclude this. For the most part, this album is great. However, Medicine is not my favourite VÄRITÄ track. It opens up with a great verse, which I love, and the lyrics on this one are actually really good, but that chorus just is not for me. To me, it feels very much like a filler track on the album, and it kind of kills the pace. Rearranging the track list slightly, I'd personally cut it and go straight from Faded to Think of Me. I don't particularly think Medicine adds much to it and doesn't really fit well with the instrumental palette of this. We also have the other two promotional singles to go over. That's Good For It and The Youth. I loved both. These tracks are great. The pre-chorus in Good For It is one of my favourites, and I love the effortless transitions from verse to pre-chorus to chorus. Youth has these really nice, what I'm presuming are wobble synths, which are really nice and are a defining factor to the song, making it unique from the rest of the track list. This one is another great one for lyrics. I love the part about hooking up with someone at 3 AM. That line came for me. I did not like it, but I loved it at the same time. So overall, this album is a step in the right direction for VÄRITÄ, and there's a lot of artistic growth here coming off of Somewhere in Between. This album is a really good collection of songs, minus my one nitpick about Medicine that has sort of just dragged it down a tiny bit. There were some times throughout where I felt that some of the tracks were a bit too familiar. I will say Good For It did feel like a generic pop song. Medicine feels sort of familiar in the terms that it felt filler. And Amnesia, I did feel the influences to the 1975 showed a little too much, but I feel like that might just be a personal one, because when I've discussed it with friends, they've not found the same influence there as I have. So overall, I think I'd give New Skin an 8 or an 8.5 out of 10. I'm really rubbish at saying goodbye, so if you want, feel free to share your thoughts with me on the album and we can chat about it. Thanks for watching, listening. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.